Everyone. Good to be with you and see people arriving. I see Karen getting herself set for sitting, so that's good. Follow her lead. Here we go. As we sit together in just these brief minutes. When most of our external activity has been set aside, and we simply sit and breathe, can you accept what's here? Can you accept what you discover? The actuality of just sitting here as you in front of a computer screen. Can you accept yourself when you get quiet and still? Maybe that's enough. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. Wearing the universal teaching, I realize the one true nature, thus harmonizing all being. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. Wearing the universal teaching, I realize the one true nature, thus harmonizing all being. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. Wearing the universal teaching, I realize the one true nature, thus harmonizing all being. I'm looking forward to seeing many of you in person soon. And I look forward to sitting with you and meeting with you and just enjoying the kind of shared presence that we know about. Pardon me. And being together these days in person, we get together a lot, but it brings kind of a special flavor since it's more rare, at least for me. Many of you are together quite a bit. I also wanted to let you know that today, in this meeting, I'm going to be stepping off about 5 minutes early so that I can join Aaron for a telehealth appointment with his new neurologist we couldn't schedule at another time. And of course, we want to be together for that. So we can review his recent test results. And then we don't have to fly to Oahu. We don't have to be in person, although it's nice sometimes to sit with your doctor in person. But for this, um, we can do it online. And before the internet, remember that? And before FaceTime or Skype or Zoom, that ancient world, we talked on the phone. Sometimes it had a thing that went around and a cord, and or we'd write letters by hand and we'd mail them and wait. When I started my training at San Francisco Zen Center, um, in the last century, literally, I I would carve out a week here and there to leave my psychotherapy practice and travel all the way to the West Coast and sit with my teacher and my friends. And then I developed a place to sit in Austin. And then Peg and I met since she had done the same. But all of this I'm musing about is bringing up uh, this question and a feeling about what it's like to try to um, meet with your teacher in training, to extend yourself, do something to make sure that you can make that happen, which we know is important. But it was brought to my attention that one of our teacher friends, a good friend, Barry Magid, some of you have read some of his books probably. He's a Dharma heir of Joko Beck. He is a psychoanalyst in New York City, very traditional psychoanalyst, and has the Ordinary Mind Zendo there. Um, in fact, I was talking to him the other day, and he was saying so many things have gone online, since COVID, that they're even wondering if they should continue to pay the outrageous rent in Manhattan for a place to meet that they do. I guess you can probably imagine it's incredibly expensive. And Barry posted on Facebook recently a letter that he had received um, from Joko. And I'll screen share it, but the screen share isn't meant for you to actually be able to read it. It's too fuzzy. He had put it on Facebook, so I'm okay sharing it. It's just an artifact, but I'll let you know uh, what with that letter. He posted above the letter. He said, "This is out of my files," and then he used the word typically, which I think he was pointing to for her, typically for her. she writes that it doesn't matter if I come out to see her. Remember, he's in Manhattan, she's in San Diego, across the US continent anyway, or country. She said, what counts is whether, he said, what counts is whether I'm clear about practice moment to moment in my life. So let me read the letter to you. I went through it and best I could, I sorted out what it said. There's no year. I'm not sure what year it was. I would imagine it was probably in the early 90s. Could have been earlier. And it looks like it was dated December 10th, but that may just be my projection since it's my birthday. But it looks like December 10th. I'll read the whole letter to you. Dear Barry, sorry to be so slow in answering. This Australia trip this year has left me too tired. It's like, amen, girl. That's how I feel these days when I take these long trips. Um, I had just barely been able to keep the schedule here. Other things were put on hold. However, I've been thinking about your letter from time to time. At this point, I see no urgent necessity for you to come out here. Of course, it's always stimulating to sit with others who have a strong practice. But more important is the question of whether we, and then she put in parentheses, I and you, whether we understand what we're doing practice-wise. If this understanding is fairly clear, a person can very well practice alone for extended periods. That's all a little vague, or perhaps not. Then she says, how clear are you about what practice is in all your waking moments? And then she asks a question. If you were to give a talk on your practice to your colleagues, what would you say? Could you write me a few paragraphs on your practice? Now she's getting down to it. Yeah. To say that there's nothing to say is true, but still, there is something to say and to do. So I love this ending. It's really very hard. She said, so think about it. Love, Choco. So think about it. She wrote, more important than him flying across the country or me. More important is the question of whether we understand what we were doing practice-wise. And then she asked that question, or a challenge really. She said, if you were going to give a talk on your practice to your colleagues, what would you say? That's basically what I do every Tuesday. If I'm going to give a talk, a little something to encourage us so we can talk, I'm basically, over and over at some version of, what are we doing? Do you remember what this is? And how deeply can we inquire? Could you write me a few paragraphs on your practice? She says, how clear are you about what practice is in your waking moments? That's the essence of inquiry. But it's also like those turning points on many of the koans, the ancestor stories, where the teacher says, say something, or there's a challenge, you've got to say something. What is it? So this question about, are you clear about what your practice is? And if one of your friends says, you go to these retreats or you go to inquiry, you do this stuff, what are you doing? What is it? What is this practice really? We say practice. What do you mean? I'm actually asking you now. So you have to raise your hand and let's hear some answers. What is it? If somebody that didn't know anything about this said, what is it that you do? What would you say? I don't have a cat to cut in half here, but when we're talking about this stuff, it's very alive and interesting. But when you ask that question, it gets harder, doesn't it, Sheila?
Living with awareness.
Okay, living with awareness. Yeah. Okay. There's one. Great. Living with awareness. Of course, we always live with awareness. It's like, what is what kind of awareness are we living with? Yeah. Maria?
Hi, yeah, I think for me it's kind of sitting long enough to catch what it is I'm up to, what I'm doing, what's going on, and to kind of be able to create a space between my reaction and a response to the world, to sort of widen that space by catching all the things that can get in the way of that.
Okay, so that's a function of living with awareness that Sheila said, is you begin to notice habit patterns.
Yeah, yeah, and
Right.
noticing, kind of just being aware of all the different things that go on, between me and the world, and
And
to create less suffering, isn't it, as well?
you say between, so there's a gap because you're creating a self in these habitual ways, which begins to distance you from what's happening. So thank you. That's a useful thing. Living with awareness, noticing what comes up. Jess?
I thought of how I offer myself, how I engage.
You see, you put something in the chat about presence, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so you're part of practice. Somebody said, why do you do this practice?
It it changes the way I meet you, and it
Oh,
lets me actually meet you.
okay. So it does have something about intimacy and meeting and presence and those kind of things. Okay. Nancy?
For me, lately, and I guess it's a journey, is to live with what is,
Uh-huh.
with what is in front of me, and be aware of what's in front of me, what is, and then be with it.
Yeah. And so the things that each of you said is like a little Dharma talk. Become more acutely aware of the patterns that we create that separate us from reality so that we are not quite as intimate with the moment and then accept what we find.
Right.
All four of you put together a nice Dharma talk. Thank you. Yeah.
Lovely.
And I'm interested in other, I'll say a few more things just because that's what I do. But I'm, I love that you're coming forward so beautifully. Because, I think most of us end up coming to practice because there's some question deep inside. Aside from the psychological stuff, somebody said to me when I was ordained, oh, pardon me, and began to teach, when students come to you for practice discussion, they're going to bring exactly the same thing that they bring to you in your psychotherapy office. It's the difference is who they meet, and you won't get paid. And it was kind of an interesting, kind of funny, cynical thing, but it's who they meet. Oh, because we bring our lives because that's what we have, and we can bring our problems because that's what we get obsessed with. But in a spiritual practice, it isn't just about how to solve the problems, that's there, but it's the question like, who am I? What is this? What does any of this mean? And how am I supposed to participate in it? Those deeper questions. I love this quote. It's a little facile and tricky, but I love it, from Albert Einstein. And some of you have heard it, I know. He said, there's only two ways to live your life. One is as though nothing is a miracle. The other is that everything is a miracle. You can use that scientific materialist point of view. Nothing's a miracle. You can, all this. Or like, this is, I don't know what this is. This is amazing. So that's kind of interesting. But I went back and took a look at some of Joko's teaching that were behind some of the things that maybe she was expressing to Barry. Here's a very brief little paragraph. She said, to some degree, we all find life difficult, perplexing, even oppressive. And even if it goes well, as it may for a time, we worry that it probably won't keep going that way. Depending on our personal history, we arrive at adulthood with very mixed feelings about this life. If I were to tell you that your life is already perfect, whole, and complete just as it is, you would think I was crazy. Nobody believes his or her life is perfect. And yet there is something within each of us that basically knows we're boundless, limitless. we're caught in the contradiction of finding life a rather perplexing puzzle, which causes us a lot of misery. And at the same time, being dimly aware of the boundless, limitless nature of life. So we begin looking for an answer to the puzzle. I thought that was a pretty good description of how some of us come. Even as a kid, did any of you have this sense of like the mystery back there somewhere, but you didn't know what to really do with it, you know? Zoom thinks I raised my hand. There you go. And I am. I'm just sort of testifying, you know. But anyway, and I think, you know, part of what she's pointing to is that statement you've heard me make many times that we are messy miracles, not perfectible creatures. And just as a matter of sort of teaching, I really appreciate this. There are a couple of responses. This takes it a little further than Einstein, but not in such a dramatically beautiful way. Two basic responses to life challenges that I've always really appreciated. This is like, I'm going to quote Joanna Macy and then David Loy. It's like they listened to Joko and they started to think about it. Okay, think about it. How does this go? About the struggles. And so here's the first one. Joanna Macy. She writes about how do we meet this perplexing, difficult, strange, wonderful world. She says, basically, we try three strategies: explanation, prediction, and control. We want to try and explain it, predict it, and control it. And she said the antidote practice is then profound appreciation. When we soften our insistence that we explain it all and predict it all and try to control it, is profound appreciation. The challenge to learn to be, I think what Nancy said, to be with what is. Using the difficulties as the path of awakening instead of something to explain, predict, control, and letting life be with awe and gratitude. When we chant caught in the self-centered dream, this is what we're chanting, isn't it? So explain, predict, control. It's actually what this culture teaches us instead of profound appreciation. The challenge to be with life as it is, using the difficulties we do find as the path on awakening. That's what we work with. Like Maria said, that's what we wake up to. Like Sheila said, that's what we have to be present with each other, like Cassie was talking about. So in Joanna Macy's work, this is what she talks about. In David Loy's work, another, if you've not heard of him, he's a wonderful Buddhist teacher and philosopher and writer. He says our primary response to the difficulties, it's similar, but he uses different language. He says, controlling and fixating the world we're in. And it's basically the same, it's different language. And think about it. If we want to explain, predict, control, or control and fixate, it's basically because we're scared. It's about fear. And so David Loy says, and the antidote, just like Joanna Macy's is profound appreciation, he said his antidote, which is practice, is opening to the world. The challenge is to come to see the truth of who we are, to open to the truth, whatever that is, of who we really are in the midst of this crazy, gorgeous, conditioned world, and to let it open and open and open and open, even into death. That's not an ending, that's the opening. And so we chant, vast is the road of liberation. So these two approaches really echo the chants that we use also. And they point to our contraction to try to, it's like we're on a roller coaster and we're like gripping really hard and closing our eyes. You know, it's like, here we go. I try to control it as if that would, it's like you wouldn't be terrified as you go over the top if you tighten up all your muscles. But that's basically how we live. And so we sit. And we engage some training. Here's Joko again. She said, we enter a discipline. We enter a discipline. We enter a discipline, like Zen practice, so that we can learn to live in a sane way. Zen is almost 1,000 years old, and the kinks have been worked out. While it's not easy, it's not insane. It's down to earth. It's very practical. It's about our daily life. It's about working better in the office, raising our kids better, having better relationships. Having a more sane and satisfying life must come out of a sane, balanced practice. What we want to do is find some way of working with the basic insanity that exists because of our blindness. Then I would add, and then discover our basic sanity, which Trungpa points to, which is our true nature. See, we're on this cusp all the time, love and fear, love and fear. Welcoming life as it is, we began to see in the more advanced, maybe, emptiness, that samsara and nirvana are not separate. Welcoming life, all of it, not welcoming the good stuff, pushing away the bad, that's suffering. Contracting in the face of life as it is, Nancy, it's like, we began to soften the ways that we believe in the myths of safety and separation. We believe that life is unsafe and that we believe in this separation. And as that softens in this larger view of practice and realizes samsara and nirvana are the same, form and emptiness. There's another echo from another teacher, just gaining a little traction here. Mel Weitzman, who just died a couple of years ago, as you know, one of the teachers that I was able to be with some and was the Dharma transmission teacher for my teacher, Blanche. Mel says, and Mel was great because he was so down to earth, extremely down to earth, nothing fancy about him. Norman Fisher, I was listening to a talk the other day, and he said the first time he met Mel, he had moved to Oakland or Berkeley, and he thought he would look for the Zen Center. So he did what we used to do, is take that big fat book called a phone book and look up Zen Center. And there was one in Berkeley. So he looked up the address on Dwight Way, and he went over, and it was this little house, and there was a guy raking leaves in the front. And he asked the guy, what goes on here? And he said, well, we, have sitting, and when should I come? And he told him, and that was great. And then when he went to the service, the guy that was raking the leaves had the robes on and was leading it was Mel, but he never said anything. He was just the guy raking the leaves. So Mel says, we're all in the same boat. I'm a failure. We're all failures. The main thing is not how successful you are at being perfect. I'm not talking about how to be perfect. I'm talking about how to be completely, Cassie. Each one of us does the best we can. That's the main point. If we do our best, it is already an expression of enlightenment. Enlightenment is not at the end of a road. It's within our effort. When you have the hardest time and it seems like you're failing, that's actually pure practice. To have this difficult time and to stay with it and do your utmost, that's pure practice. We're messy miracles, not perfectible creatures. So I had copied down another several paragraphs of Joko's, which I don't need to read you, but what I did is I highlighted the first sentence and the last sentence of each of the paragraphs because I thought this is very interesting. I could say it's, so here's the little broken up piece. Let's just listen to how it sounds to you. I call it Joko's challenge. It takes courage to sit well. No longer caught by objects, there can be an opening. And for a second, you can realize who you really are. Sitting is not something that we do for a year or two with the idea of mastering it. Our whole life becomes practice, 24 hours a day. I'm often accused of emphasizing the difficulties in practice. The accusation is true. From time to time, we do experience joy. Joy isn't something we have to find. Joy is who we are if we're not preoccupied with something else. Joy is who we are when we're not preoccupied with something else. And then just one last voice out of emptiness, Suzuki Roshi. He gave this in a talk on August 28th, 1965. So nearly 60 years ago. He says, the purpose of practice is to accept ourselves. The purpose of practice is to accept ourselves. Knowing that all our efforts are to accept ourselves. When we can accept ourselves, we are already one with all existence. When spring comes, we can enjoy the spring flowers. When summer comes, we can enjoy the cool moonlight. When the autumn comes, we can appreciate the beauty of the foliage. In winter, we appreciate the snow. When we can accept ourselves, we can accept anything. And I see that Bridget's ready to go.
Well, I raised my hand just before you read that quote because when I was sort of smiling from the inside out, because before you made that remark about courage, I just thought this is so encouraging. And so then you read, so it was as if it entered me before you even said it. So thank you.
Yeah, that's the thing. You know, when we I got a note. Peg and I both got a note from a student this morning that said something about when I try to remember what all the good things I've gotten from you all the years, I can't remember. I can't remember what you said, or I can't remember the details, but I remember what it was like to be with you. This is before I did the talk today. You know, what it was like to, what you showed me, what it felt like. That's the real transmission. And not because we have something special either. Like Mel said, we're all in the same boat. But it's how practice helps us be in that boat in a different way, to not make trouble and to accept ourselves so we can accept others as the entire thing unfolds. Sometimes it's beautiful, sometimes it's difficult, and that will never change. What will change is how we are with each other in it. So you were smiling at that encouragement already, and in that transmitted in that same way. Thank you. I have one of those little notes on that half-size sheet from Joko that she'd written to me at one point, and I lost it. I can't find it anywhere. I don't remember what it says, but it's like that's a little bit of presence, you know? It was just, she wasn't there when I went one time to sit, but I'd sent her a note and she said, oh, come back, you know, hope you will. Encouragement. But she took the time to write it and send it. That's the thing. Another way to ask the question that I'm asking you about, what do you think practice is? And are you clear about practice? Because remember in the letter, Joko's not saying, don't seek out your teacher. She's saying there are times what's more important is that you understand what real practice is day in and day out. Do you understand what you're up to? And there was something else I was going to say, but now I've forgotten it. So Rosemarie will probably remind me.
Hi, Flint. Well, my thought was to help me open my heart to the world and to work with the delusion of separateness, which is kind of ever present. And I wondered, because I practice with Sangha so much, most of the time, if that purpose would be different, or whether I would be able to get to these things that are important, if I weren't sitting that way so much.
Well, we know that there's something, and Joko says it's really great to sit with other people who have a strong practice in the letter, because she's saying there's an encouragement that comes with just sitting next to somebody or in front of them like this, which you do mostly.
Yeah, and it's encouragement, and it's also it shows me like pretty quickly where I'm stuck.
Well, that's the one I asked, because you mentioned a couple of things that you thought practice was, and they were, say them again briefly. But I think
To help me open my heart to the world.
open your heart to the world and look at the places where you get caught. So then and that sounds really good, but then the next question would be like, how do you do that? Like, how does sitting still facing a wall or a computer to help that? Because from a psychological point of view, you and I could do all kinds of descriptions about that stuff. But if we set that aside, how does just sitting there in silence and upright stillness help what you just said, you know, that you receive in practice?
I don't know, but something about starting with the breath, the embodiment of the sitting. Well, that somehow connects me to everything, because everything's, well, those of us who breathe, and yeah, that somehow that the embodiment for me helps connect me to more than me.
Okay, so focusing on something simple, the breath being the thing, and it's embodied. And in Zazen, we emphasize posture as well. So if you only take care of your breath and your posture, remember, and awakening takes care of itself. So there's something about, isn't it interesting that it's about doing less, not more? So it must be that there's something always and already true.
Yeah, something like that.
And you look like you're thinking about something.
Well, I think, one of the first, just learning to sit and be still and quiet, those basic things. The ocean was the image for my breath. And so, I think for me, it just kind of started like that and then I started with Sangha. So I didn't start alone. And then, I maybe because I'm a visual person, the other visuals like breathing together, like this one breath kind of image. And then there's continuing practice, which had all its, confusing and messiness to it. But yeah,
Yeah, when
so
you practice with Sangha over time, you realize, oh, this is the same old stuff I find everywhere. Apparently, I show up the same way, and so does everybody else. We're all in the same boat, you know. But
yeah,
it is an interesting question. It's what we come back to every single week. Like, now, what are we doing? That's not, that doesn't mean we don't know what's happening. And it means it's a worthwhile question to keep coming back to. Are
I'm
we
very
clear
grateful.
about practice in that every day? And that's what we inquire in. Are we
Yeah.
clear about it? Because when we say practice, we get so used to using the word, we forget what it means. And that's something that we can pay some attention to. And like Joko said, think about it. Write a paragraph or two to me, you know. And I thought it was interesting that, and you appreciate this, I know. She was asking, she said, if you were going to write something to your colleagues, think of who his colleagues are in the psychoanalytic community in Manhattan. If you were going to write something to your colleagues about what practice is, what would you say? And you're right there. You know? And I think that's not a bad homework for everybody. Just if you were going to write something, just a paragraph to your friends, to your family, I don't know, anybody that's close by. If they really didn't understand it and or didn't have much experience, what would you say in the hope that it would touch something that you know about them, you know, that would be personal, be a language they could understand? And this is about your own clarity, of course, because she said, it's good to be together. Please come see me, be with your teacher, but being clear about practice is what's important day to day. So thank you, Rosemary.
I appreciate the question.
Everybody's opening such beautiful things. Denise.
Hello, Flint. Um, um, so regarding your question, the first word that came into my mind was listening.
Mm-hmm.
Then listening to what the others shared. I think for me, practice is also sitting and not being calm, and sitting and not being silent, and being aware of what happens,
Mm-hmm.
and having the trust that I have something in me that recognizes the difference between the
Agitation.
agitation and, for instance, when suddenly I feel something in me is straightening up, but not because I want to, but it's just I am straightened up by something.
Yes, yes, yes. You're getting to another important point.
And not being, not wanting it to remain, but just
Yes,
being in a way thankful that it is,
yes,
that it
yes,
arrives.
yes. This is another important point. I'm glad you're making this distinction.
And then I have also listening to the others. No, maybe first I want to say something else or share something else, because I think the last few months have been very difficult for me
Yeah.
regarding what happens in the Middle East and anti-Semitism that is growing, and I can feel it, and I can, I not only feel it, but I think thanks to having these moments of sitting, I can, because the possibility or the invitation is me and the others, separate and
Mm.
not being understood, not trusting what do the other think. And even if I don't know what the other think, and maybe they think things that I wouldn't like, I can meet it differently.
Yes. Mhm.
So Yeah, I feel something blocks me to speak more about it.
That's okay. Yeah. It's a powerful point of practice. Very, very powerful in a very difficult time.
Hmm.
As a Jewish woman in the middle of Europe with all these things going on, I don't know what that feels like, but I know you and I love you and I hear the wisdom that's coming through you, even in the difficulty. So thank you for offering yourself and coming forward.
Maybe I want to share two more things. Quickly, just I'm doing also synagogue tours, and lately I had a class of small children with special needs, and I'm really thankful that the teacher came. And there was a little boy who, at the end of the tour, he was like thinking a lot, and he said, "How wonderful is it that there are so many different religions? It would be so boring if there would only be one religion." And it came from his heart. And I just thought it was really a gift to receive this.
It's like a blessing.
Yeah.
You know, I know this may sound strange, but it's a personal request because I'm going to step away when we finish, and I'm going to have Jessica lead the final chant in just a minute. It's fine. But as a blessing, so this little boy, I assume he was speaking Swiss German.
Yes.
So say it like he said it as our final blessing.
He said, "Oh, das ist doch gut, gibt so viele verschiedene Religionen. Das wäre doch blöd und langweilig, wenn es nur eine gäbe."
Can everybody feel how much more? There it is, the blessing. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank everyone. And thank you for letting me step away. I'll see you all very soon. Jessica, take over.
Thank you so much, Flint. Thank you, everyone. Shall we finish with the 4 practice principles? Caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering. Holding to self-centered thoughts, exactly the dream. Each moment, life as it is, the only teacher. Being just this moment, compassion's way. Caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering. Holding to self-centered thoughts, exactly the dream. Each moment, life as it is, the only teacher. Being just this moment, compassion's way. Caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering. Holding to self-centered thoughts, exactly the dream. Each moment, life as it is, the only teacher. Being just this moment, compassion's way. Thank you all for being here. As you know, Appamada's programs and facilities are because of and for all of you. So thank you for your generosity. Placing a link in the chat if you'd like to make a financial contribution to keep things going and to keep the lights on. And now I would love to hand it over to our dear Maria. Please, you're invited to visit with her on the porch.